You communicate with Saul yourself now.
Through a pendulum.
Tell us about that.
I can pick up a pendulum, hold it perfectly still, and it starts swinging wildly to the right, which is his way of saying, I love you. I can even show this to you if you'd like. And we can actually have a conversation. And I also got a message about this new book that we'll talk about that I'm writing, that I was literally told to do this book.
Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show, where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. I'm delighted to welcome my dear friend, Irene Weinberg, to the show today. Irene's journey has been profoundly shaped by a premonition she had about her husband's passing that illuminated her understanding of fate and spirituality. Together, we'll dive into topics such as spirit communication, the concept of soulmates, exploring past lives, navigating the grief journey, and how to discover your soul's purpose. So, join us as we explore the magic that lies within all of us. Irene, my fave, welcome to the show.
What a pleasure. I think we're a mutual admiration society, Julie.
Oh, my heavens. I've been on your show, 2 or 3 times?
3 times.
3 times. My goodness, what an honor. And, we just started doing interviews routinely. So you were on the top of my list of people to have on.
Thank you.
So everybody is going to just love your story. So let's just get right into it. Have you been an intuitive your whole life?
What I would say is the early part of my life, I was a 100% complete skeptic. I now realize from different things that happened in my life that I was intuitive, but I didn't identify it that way. And I thought people who were in the spiritual world were cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I really thought that they were very woo-woo until this thing that we're going to tell people about happened to me and turned my life literally upside down. But I was never, I was very traditional. I had intuition, but I just thought, oh, that's a coincidence. How did I know that?
Yeah.
Stuff like that would go on. Or I could read a room, and I thought, it was because of my dysfunctional childhood, and I had to read a room to get right. But I realize now that was an ability that actually saved me, because I was sometimes able to read a room like that. So that's all part of intuition.
All right. So tell us the story of how your intuition really came online.
How it really knocked me for a loop, literally and figuratively. Well, I was married to the love of my life. We were both a second marriage. I had custody of his kids. He had custody of my little boy. So that tells you volumes. And we were really, really happily married. We were married about 18 years. And one day I'm sitting in front of my kitchen sink and washing a dish, which I guess you could say is sort of meditative, but because I didn't identify anything like that, I suddenly got a thought that was not my thought. It was bizarre to me. And what came into my mind was, Saul has to go. Many lessons will be learned from his death. I thought, what the heck am I thinking? It was like so not my thought, but it came into my brain like a thought. So my husband, Saulie, was watching a Jets game on TV. I filled a glass of water. I went over to him. I kissed the top of his head. I gave him the glass of water, and I promptly thought I put it out of my mind, this weird thought. But of course, you never forget that. And 2 months later, we were skiers, Julie. We had a ski house in the Catskills, and we were on the New York State Thruway. And we were driving through this up to our ski house, and something told me. So talk about intuition. Something told me, make this the best weekend Saul ever had, even if he wants to go to a restaurant with people you don't really want to go with. Go, just because he was having a tough time with something in business. And something very strongly told me, just go along with whatever he wants this weekend. So the night actually before this accident happened, he said to me, wasn't this the best weekend a couple could ever have? And he made a comment to me that he was he said, I'm so lucky and thankful to have you in my life, and which I will never forget. And the next day, we got in our car to go home, and we were on the New York State Thruway going 72 miles an hour. We were in the left lane, and all of a sudden, the car went about an hour and a half after we had started our trip home. The car went into a huge swerve, and I looked over, and my husband was sound asleep at the wheel.
Oh, heavens.
And in the car. And I turned and I looked at him and I said, Saul. And he woke up and he went to pull the car out of the swerve. And instead, we rose into the air for the first of 4 flips, Julie. I felt like I was in a gigantic roller coaster. And as we took off the first, and each time we hit very hard on the right-hand side, we had 4 flips. I had 4 serious surgeries due to each of the flips, but I was conscious through everything. I didn't know the meaning of that word then, but now I do, and I was aware and conscious of everything. So as we took off for the first flip, we flipped up into the air, landed hard, and flipped again. And as we flipped the second time, another message came into my head, and it said, he's not going to make it, you are. Well, you hardly had time to process that as you're flipping into the air. And as we flipped in the second flip, we got to, if you were looking at a clock, like from 10 of to 10 after, during that time, I left my body. I don't know exactly, it was black, but I knew I just left my body. And I've been told that I was seated with the mission that I have now. And I was given amnesia. But that's what I've been told a few times. So so things were very weird, and all of a sudden I literally felt myself come back into my body for the third flip. We flipped up again, 4th flip, and then we landed upside down in a ravine. And I look over at Saul and I go, holy moly, to myself. I was told that he was gonna go. And I said, Saulie, are you okay? And sure enough, I'm looking at the shell of my husband, the whole beautiful persona, everything that was so wonderful was gone. And I said, oh my God, I got in that moment. He's with me. Something's up here. There's more that goes on and all of this. All this is going through my mind, I see a helicopter land in front of the car because we were upside down, and we held up traffic on the thruway for 2.5 hours.
Oh my.
And these three EMTs jumped out of the helicopter and were rocking the car back and forth to get it right side up on the road. I mean, there were still pieces of my car on the road 6 months later, Julie. And as we kind of bounced back up on the road, one of them put his hands through the shattered window of my car, turned me around, and started pulling me through the window of my car. And as he did, a voice came into my head. And I tell women, I want to tell you it was a female voice, but it was a male voice. I've been told it was perhaps an ascended master like Gabriel. And the voice gave me a directive, and it said, be loving and kind to everyone, as they laid me on the side of the road. Now, I don't know about you, Julie, but that tends to change your cells as they're multiplying. I mean, holy moly. So instead of screaming for myself and carrying on, all of a sudden, I feel I've been given a directive by heaven, and I'm saying to everyone, what's your name? It's the weekend before Christmas. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you so much for helping me. They're loading me into the helicopter to take me to an emergency trauma center. I get to the center, and I thank them so much for helping me. The doctor comes over to tell me that I have to tell you your husband's gone. And I said, Doc, I know. And I'm the luckiest woman in the world to have been with this man for the time I was. And then there were other things that happened, and everything that happened to me, because I'd been given this directive, was handled in a very loving and a very kind way without screaming or big concern about myself. And 3 months after the accident, I got a call from the assistant to the surgeon who operated on me, 19 stitches in an artery at the bottom of my right foot that was torn. And I got a call from her, and she said, Irene, I need to tell you, you changed lives in the emergency room that night. We have seen everything on that throughway, and we never saw anyone respond the way you did to such a tragedy with so much love and kindness for everyone. And I said, Trish, I had a spiritual awakening that has changed my life. So anyway, but now I'm going to take you back, because about 6 weeks after the accident. Okay, question?
In your book, which I love, you guys, They Eat Bagels in Heaven. They Serve Bagels in Heaven is such a great read. I'm reading your book for the first time. You're talking about going to the hospital, and you're saying, they take me to a Catholic hospital. Tell them what you thought when you got there. I laughed for 2 minutes.
It was a Catholic hospital, and there was, Jewish with my, my background and all this. But this is the hilarious thing. The surgeon was Jewish. And the funny part about it was, when he came up to me, he said, I have to tell you, your husband's gone. Would you like me to tell your kids when they come? And I said, Doc, I know he's gone. And I said, I'm the luckiest woman in the world, blah, blah. I said, but I sure could use a rabbi right now, because I feel I should tell the kids that their dad's gone. And he said, as a matter of fact, I'm the assistant rabbi of my synagogue, and I'll be happy to help you with that. It was like so amazing, like, wow, that of all people. And I said, do me a favor, just come over and stand by me as I tell each of the kids. And then there's a part of the book I talk about where my stepdaughter, who I had custody of, the police had called her, and she came with her husband, and she came into the hospital room, and she lived with me since she was 14 years old. And I had to tell her that her father was gone. And as I said, Sandy, I have to tell you that your dad didn't make it. And she fainted right away. She fainted, and 2 nurses picked her up. And I was so infused with that directive that I said to her, honey, stop. As she was running out to tell her husband that her father was gone. And I said, honey, I want you to know that I love you and I will never hurt you. And she said, I know. And she ran running out. And that was another reason I think that the people in the hospital witnessing all of this couldn't get over my presence. And the other thing that happened to me was the following day, which is very much a part of my story. My sister-in-law, who I thought was wacko because she was spiritual, comes to visit me in the hospital the next day. She said my entire aura had changed. Everything was so different about me. She couldn't even get over it. And and I'll tell everyone about how I was able to connect with Saul. But when I had no one else to tell that I had, oh my God, I heard from Saul on the other side. I called my sister-in-law, and she said, thank God, because 2 weeks after Saul died, he had come through with a message for her about the 3 kids and business deals that were left to me. And she didn't know how to tell me. So everything was like starting to...
Yeah. I want to get into all of that. I also want to get into all the miracles that you have witnessed during that time and since that time, and how you've taken action on them. But I got to tell you, when I read that part in your book, I laughed out loud. And then I thought, okay, I got to give Irene a newsflash. Jesus was a Jew.
True. Well, I want to tell you that Saul has told me that he has met Jesus on the other side, and he sees him as a great ascended master.
Right. Okay.
So there, and the more that I've gotten into this world, Julie, the less religious I am. I'm really now very spiritual. I see us all as the same. But when that happened to me, I was still very entrenched in my traditional beliefs.
Sure. Sure. As are most people in the Western world and really around the world, period, not just in the Western cultures, but
Yeah.
around in all cultures. So let's get to some of the miracles. And then I want you to, I've got several questions for you about how you started communicating with your husband and how it's gone from there. But tell us about some of the other miracles that happened. Certainly some good Samaritan called 911 to let them know that your car was airborne.
I would say it was quite a few.
Yeah.
Quite a few.
And the fact that they sent the helicopter was a miracle in itself away.
Right away.
Yeah.
Right away. And the other part that was really interesting is that my husband's nephew was caught in the traffic for 2.5 hours behind the accident and later realized it was his uncle. And he ended up being there for my son when my son came, had just come. My son, Saul, was buried on my son's 21st birthday. And that's another part of the story of what I thought about that changed my life as they pulled me out of the car. And my nephew just coincidentally happened to be there to be with my son while my son went through this terrible trauma, you know? And one of the things I do want to tell everyone is not only when they pulled me out of the car did I hear be loving and kind to everyone, but I also thought to myself, and this, Julie, how you can script yourself and how it's so important what you think. In that moment, I said, I will get through this and heal and do whatever I need to do, one way or the other, because I have to be a role model for my son that you can get hit by a grenade in life and still keep going, which was amazing. They had just pulled me out of the car. And 4 years after the accident, my son said to me, you know what, Mom, there's been nothing worse than seeing you in total despair and nothing better than seeing you be able to have joy again. So as you know,
Wonderful.
Julie, that's why I ask everyone on my podcast, what's your tip for finding joy? Because that was like so important.
Exactly. So let's get into, can you communicate with Saul yourself now? Correct?
I communicate with Saul through a pendulum.
Okay. Tell us about that.
I can tell you, I can pick up a pendulum, hold it perfectly still, and it starts swinging wildly to the right, which is his way of saying, I love you. I could even show this to you if you'd like.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And he comes through for me with the pendulum. Like
Okay.
I can have a whole conversation with him like gangbusters. And it's just so easy for me. So for instance, okay, so I'm just holding it still, right? Hey, Saul, are you here? Look, there it goes. This is his way of saying, I love you. And then I can get the yes, no, the maybes, and we can actually have a conversation. I've never had time. I probably could hone it, Julie, if I had time to take my intuition and to develop it so that I heard but in a way, the fact that I got those 3 messages and I don't get a lot of messages like that and I don't get a lot of pictures like that makes what happens to me even more poignant because I was out with my book for about 4 years, doing my thing with it. And then I suddenly one day was sitting where you see me and the word podcast came into my head. So I believe I don't hear things like that, except for when it happened to me. So I go, I'm being told something. What's a podcast? I'm a baby boomer. I was like, what are they telling me? So I was working with someone and I said, I've just got the word podcast. What does that mean? She's, oh, I can help you do that. And so that was a message that came into my head. And it's the same way someone gave me a message. I do talk to mediums and healers and all of that. And I interview them. And I also got a message about this new book that we'll talk about that I'm writing that I was literally told to do this book. So
I get the same thing.
You get it.
Yeah. Well, I call it divine downloads, and I'll get them during the day, Irene. I'll get in the mornings when I'm waking up early. I'm still kind of asleep. I'm a little bit awake. I get these divine downloads of boom, 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 boom. I've gotten whole business plans that way.
Wow.
I've gotten, do this, 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 this. In the middle of writing a screenplay with a couple of partners. I mean, the characters are coming to me. The plots are coming to me. They're
Fantastic.
all divine downloads. And that's what's happening with you. For those of you that are listening, by the way, Irene held up a pendulum. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see it. But for those of you that are in the car or whatever, and you're just listening to this, that pendulum took off and that thing started swinging like nobody's business when she held it up. And she said, Saul, are you here? And that thing started going wild. So that was fun. What has Saul told you about his passing?
He told me
the actual experience of passing.
He said that he describes it in the book, actually. And he said that because he was traditional in his Jewish beliefs when he passed. Of course, when we cross over, we get a much broader view. We get there and we get whatever our religion is or whatever, that we get that visual until we start to adjust to the more universal view. And he told me that he was, as he crossed over, he clung to his prayers and whatever, and he crossed over. He went through a tunnel and he came to the other side. And his mother, who had died when he was 16, presented him with a visual of a bagel and coffee in heaven, which would have been talk about, for a Jewish person, that would be a very welcome home, right? And that was before she turned into, his life review and the creator and all of that kind of thing. So he described it, and then he described his life review. And he said I was a very kind person in this life, but there were times I missed the opportunity to be loving and kind to people. I was shown that. And there were also choices that I made that I was shown how it would have worked out if I made maybe a better choice or whatever, and all of that. So when I channeled him, I started asking him, so have you found people who are evil over there? What goes on with all of that? And does this happen? And does that happen? He also told me that he saw people doing penance for crappy things that, can I say crappy on your show? Crappy
Sure.
Things that they had done in their lifetimes. Like he talked about one man who had been very cruel to his family, and he was having to try to help his family from the other side and trying to make it up to them. And that even has happened to me lately, because I had, as I mentioned before, I had a very abusive father who lately has been coming through. He must be healing on the other side, because he's been coming through apologizing to me constantly, telling me he's learning so many lessons, that I shouldn't stop what I'm doing. He's learning, and please consider him as a stepping stone, not an ending. And he's so happy that I'm healing from whatever trauma he inflicted on me. So all of that goes on the other side too. There are healing places there. They really help you, and people get the picture of the choices that they make, because we're given amnesia. How would we learn? If this is school and we come here to learn, how would we be if we had all the answers before we got here? So we get this amnesia, and it is left to us to make these choices.
I have people that will say to me, either on my show or private clients, and they will say, oh, my mom was just like the bitch from hell. She's the last person I want to see as I'm dying or when I get to heaven. And the thing that I always tell them is, it's been my experience doing this for all these years and talking to thousands and thousands of spirits, that the personality traits of the person in that incarnation, like this woman as she knew her mother in this lifetime, stays with the body. All spirits are pure love, and that stays with the body. Now, our spirits our deceased loved ones are going to give us nuances about their personality so that we know that we're actually communicating with them. But all of the snarkiness stays with the body. Have you heard that from
I've
Saul
heard
and
that
from
too.
others?
I've heard that
Yeah.
too. Yeah. Because you get the picture and you're not you leave that behind. It's the same way where you leave when you cross over this disease you had or these issues you had. You leave them behind. And a lot of people, when they come through, and I know that you know this, Julie, they present themselves when they were in the peak of they're in their 30s or their 40s and the top health, not this person who had dementia and was, on the way out or whatever. And they can choose how they will present themselves to you, but they are fine once they cross over. They leave that. In fact, I'll tell you something funny. My husband had a very, very hard time. Saul had a very hard time divorcing his first wife. She had a lot of problems. And it was a very hurtful, acrimonious divorce. And one day, many years later, someone was he was coming through, so I was channeling him to me. And I made a comment about, boy, Saul, you really went through it was so awful what you went through. And he said, doesn't matter anymore. It's all done. It's all behind me because that doesn't matter anymore. They cross over. They see what happened. People play different roles in your life for lessons that you're supposed to learn. And so now that person who was perhaps the villain in your life, you cross over and they say, hey, good to see you. Yep, I did my part for the lessons you were supposed to learn or whatever. And it's different. And so the other part is there are healing places in heaven. And for that lovely person whose mother was such a bitch, she can be comforted for the fact that her mother gets that life review and gets to feel every single thing that she did to her daughter. And that's part of her lessons learned. And now she goes and she probably goes to a healing place and is working on herself if she chooses. And the other thing that I've been told is that when we cross over, everyone is not the same vibration. So if you've been my mother did not have a good marriage to my father. She used to make a joke, if your father's meeting me when I cross over, I ain't going. So now it was just a coincidence. About 4 months before my mother passed, before she transitioned, as I like to say, I had made an appointment just as a lift for myself to be uplifting with a medium I knew who lived in the UK. And my mother was in assisted living in Florida. And the appointment was set for 4 months after I made the thing. How did I know, talk about coincidence, that my mother, that the appointment we had would turn out to be an hour and a half after my mother transitioned. It was amazing. So I didn't know if I was going to hear from my mother or not. And I get on with this medium and my mother's message was, yay, I made it. And she describes my paternal grandfather who took her over and all of that. And I said to her in the message, Mom, have you seen Dad? She said, I'm taking my time. And she said, but he's in a different level than I am. So obviously, my father's choices of behavior brought him in at a lower vibration than my mother was. And now, lately, they've been presenting themselves together. So it sounds to me like he's healed. They're together. Her attitude has changed. They're together on the other side. And they've obviously healed and understand their differences. And now they're doing their thing over there.
I've heard from Spirit many times that the analogy, they talk to me in analogies a lot. I know you get them as well. And what they say is that when we incarnate, it's as if, to your point, we're playing a role in a movie. And certainly some of the most successful actors will tell you their favorite role was of playing the villain because it was so rich in so many different ways they could develop the character. And so that's how I picture it. And it's really hard for us in our human minds, I believe, to be able to make peace with somebody like a Hitler or a mass murderer or somebody that's just awful and abusive and, maybe on a global scale even. We say, well, how can that person, I hope that person's burning in hell for forever. And when they hear me say, well, all spirits go to heaven, all dogs go to heaven, like the movie in the 80s, and all spirits go to heaven too. And they say, well, no, I don't believe that. How could that be? And again, I go back to, do I understand all of it? No. Is it feasible to me, after hearing this so many times from spirit, that they're playing a role?
Well,
for
the
them
other part
to explore, and for others to explore from their perspective as well, perhaps being a victim or being an accomplice or being a whatever.
Well, the other part about it also is I asked Saul about Hitler. I said, what happens over there with people who are so evil? And he said, first of all, he said they cannot reincarnate until the consequences of their behavior has been healed and worked out. So I imagine Hitler will be in a tree till eternity or somewhere with his soul.
But time doesn't exist in the spirit world.
Right.
So, that eternity there maybe not even be a blip on our
Right,
human time radar screen. Oh my gosh, how funny.
Can you think about his life review?
Oh gosh, I can't even imagine.
My God.
Yeah.
Which that's a comfort to me, Julie. When I encounter people who are toxic, I sometimes can comfort myself and say, I'm going to detach from this person, but they're going to get quite the life review. I don't have to do anything about that. That will be taken care of.
Like we could anyway.
Right.
We can't. We think we can, but we can't.
Right.
Does everybody have a soul purpose?
Yes. And your soul purpose can be, I asked all about that. Your soul purpose can be this most simple thing as you're coming here to learn how to love, or you're coming here to learn how to parent, or you're coming here to play a certain role or to help people in a certain way. And then other people, depending on their soul choices, have grander purposes. Like you and I obviously have a purpose in this lifetime, and with no ego intended. We just have this, we're light workers. We have this job to do, which is to enlighten people and help people on their healing path.
People ask me all the time, they say, you're a businesswoman, what are your goals? What's your business plan with all of this? And I say, I don't have one. They'll say, well, what do you mean you don't have one? It's the first time in 9 companies where I don't have a business plan. I don't have any goals. I'm being led, and something comes in and I say, okay. And then I take a step, and then the path is in front of me and the people I need show up right when I need them. And I know the same has happened to you as well.
Very much so.
And you and both of us have said, well, I don't know how to do a podcast. I don't know how to write a book.
How about what is a podcast?
I wasn't that sheltered, Irene, but yeah. And then we figure it out, and you may think the same thing, but I always think, Ryan, take a chill pill. You know how to read. You can find out what you need to know. And I just always trust that the people I need and the circumstances show up, and they do. And I know the same thing has happened for you as well.
The perfect people constantly show up for me, Julie.
Right.
They constantly, it's the most amazing thing. It points to, you really need to know that angels are around you. You have loved ones, guardian angels. They're trying to help you, and to have faith that you're being led. That's not to say you give up discernment, because there are other elements around. But I have found that if something shows up and it feels right to me, that's my next step.
Right. Exactly. I do the same thing. So how does somebody figure out what their soul's purpose is?
Well, I would say, what are you really passionate about? What really turns you on? Are you passionate about being a parent? Are you passionate about, your relationships? Are you passionate about healing? I had a really tough childhood. So I understand now that I was set up with that stuck childhood because my purpose was what I'm doing now. And if I had not experienced what I experienced, I would not understand the pain and trauma that people have to be able and understand how the healers who can help them, because I have been healing all my life, which is why I love healing, love interviewing you, Julie. I love interviewing healers because I know how they can help people. So I, like in my first experience from my dysfunctional childhood, I was working with therapists when I was in my 20s. I was abandoned by my family. And instead of killing myself or having a nervous breakdown, God knows what I guess I was programmed, I went for therapy. And as I started getting more and more enlightened and healthier, different things started happening. And then after Saul died, I worked with a life transition coach. I worked with an energy healer. Medium saved my life. So when I started the podcast, I said, all right, they're telling me to do a podcast. Who am I supposed to interview? And I said, I'm going to interview grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and people who have been through a really hard time and been able to rebirth themselves, to heal and come through it. But I would not have had an inkling about any of that if I wasn't being prepared in the beginning for what was to become my life purpose. And then when all of this happened to me, it was crazy, but it felt right. When I was told to write a book, when I was told that he was coming through with this message, it just felt right to me. And there was no real rational understanding of it, but I went with it. And then what I did was I started finding people who I trusted, who could communicate with better than I could with the other side, different people. And they all started validating my sense of where I was being led.
Well, and I call that having access to infinite wisdom. And I believe we all have access to that. Do you agree?
I agree.
How does somebody access that?
Well, you could go the shorthand way, is to start to talk to people who can help you with that, who have a lot of people have been born with these amazing abilities and then they hone them and all of that. So for me, my path was I started talking to different people who started coming through with these messages. And then I started believing in my own ability to get this, to have my own intuition. Then it became that they were validating what I was starting to feel. So I was checking it out. And I know that it's my attitude of being open to allowing the information to come in, knowing how it feels. And then sometimes I check it out with someone like Julie Ryan. What are you getting about this?
Well, and what I teach, Irene, and you know this, is that our heads are big satellite dishes and they receive and they transmit frequencies. Every spirit has a frequency they keep throughout all their lifetimes. Every thought has a frequency. So if you want to know something, you just ask. You don't even have to ask at anybody in particular. You just ask the question. That thought's going to come in, and
Absolutely.
It's going to come in a
Quick.
second, fast as you can snap your fingers or before. And then you ask more questions. And the more we do this, everybody comes in with the ability. It's just a matter of doing it and then doing it enough that we get validation like you have. And as I have, as I've learned how to do all this stuff, I didn't have dead people chasing me since childhood. I didn't know anything about this stuff. I mean, I was taught about angels and saints and the Holy Spirit and all of that, but I didn't have people talking to me. Well, we all have spirit guiding us and talking to us. We're just not aware of it. We're not cognizant of it. So when we do it with some regularity, then we get validation. The more validation we get, the more we learn to trust. Case in point, you've mentioned several instances where a medium or somebody else who's intuitive or psychic would tell you something about Saul that there is no way they could have known. And the more you heard that, the more validation that ended up stacking up in your brain going, okay, there must really be something to this. And then that helped you with your abilities as well. Tell us about your practice of bless and release. I want to know more about that.
Well, my attitude is if I come across someone who is very toxic, and I
define toxic.
Toxic is mean-spirited, deceitful, lacking integrity. The big one for me is people who love to create drama, making all kinds of problems in your life that are completely unnecessary and unwarranted. I mean, I got be loving and kind to everyone. When I have experienced people who are so mean-spirited and they're not loving and kind people, and they don't have your best interests at heart, or they're very manipulative in their way of how they, or they're narcissistic, it's only about them or whatever. I see them as younger souls, perhaps. They're in school. They have other things to learn. I don't judge them. I just say, and this has been a learning for me. Trust me, Julie, I used to be judgmental before all of this happened. I had plenty to say about everyone. I don't do that anymore because I realize that if I've had all these past lives and I've done all these things in all these past lives that were not always so savory as my soul was evolving, I don't know what stage of development this person is or whatever. So my attitude is I send them love, I send them blessings, and I detach. I don't get mean, I don't get even, I don't get into the drama. I just say, this is not for me, and I wish them well. And that has really worked well in my life in a lot of different situations. Now, that doesn't mean the person on the other side isn't still carrying on and may not like me or be mad at me or whatever, but I am not consumed with the drama and with having to get even. Or I had a situation a year or so ago in a group of, I organized a yoga group, and one of the women in the yoga group was very, very toxic, and she made a lot of trouble, and she made up stories and all of that. And I was like, how am I going to handle this? And how I ended up handling it was very respectfully. I told her that her choices with her behavior, I wish her well, and I will always be nice to her, but I'm not into like being bosom buddies or anything like that. And I detached from her. But without vitriol, which is an amazing growth on my part, honestly, because I didn't used to be that way.
How does that relate to, excuse me, those who have somebody with maybe an addiction or alcohol abuse or drug abuse or something along those lines?
I know people
I know
like that.
lots of them.
Oh, my God. Well, what I would say to these people is you can't necessarily change that person, but you can get healing for yourself, and you can figure out how you're going to handle it that will protect yourself, because maybe you've been brought up that, everything is forever and you should, let this person torture you or whatever is going on. But maybe through counseling and all that, you can empower yourself and give yourself permission to handle it in a different way. Or because if you change your dynamic in the relationship, then they often change. They can choose to change. Let's put it this way. And then you can make your choice about how you respond to it, and people who are, I've dealt with a lot of people who are very wounded, and it's their responsibility to seek healing for themselves. And if they don't, you don't need to be victimized by that. That's their stuff and their lessons to learn.
Right. Well, and that's a great point. And that's how I approach it too, Irene, very similar to how you do. And that is, this is benefiting them in some way. I don't know what their past lives have been. I don't know what they've been through in this lifetime, but them going through all the drama and trauma is benefiting them in some way. it doesn't need to be in my world.
Exactly.
And I can choose whether it is or not. And the older I get, the more I choose I don't want any part of it. But it's certainly something that when we stay out of judgment, it can work great. An example, when I was in my 20s and living in Los Angeles, my mid-20s, my parents came out to visit one time. And we were in Hollywood or someplace. I don't remember where we were going, but we were driving down the street and there was a hooker walking by. She looked like Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. I mean, there was no doubt that this gal was a hooker. And she had a wig on, and obviously it wasn't her normal hair. And my mother said, "Oh, look at that prostitute." And I said, "Yeah, I wonder what she's gone through in her life to get her to this point."
I always think that, Julie. I always think that.
And later in the same trip, we saw somebody with a really less than optimal wig on. And again, my mother said something about, "Oh, that wig is just atrocious." And I said, "Yeah, I wonder if she's a chemo patient." And you know what happened, Irene? From then on, whenever somebody would be wearing a wig and I'd be with my mother, she didn't say anything, but she said, "Gosh, I wonder if that woman is having chemo and that's why she's wearing that wig." It totally changed
Beautiful.
her outlook on it. I didn't make her wrong for it. How the heck did I know about that at that point? Who knows? But it just struck me as this prostitute, God love her. What is she dealing with at home? What has her childhood been? Is that the only way? Yeah, that she can come up with money. Maybe she's got a bunch of kids at home or something, and that's the easiest, quickest, most lucrative way for her to feed her family. Who knows?
Who knows?
So,
yeah.
Yeah, I think the judgment thing really kind of smacks us in the face the older we get. Do you agree with that?
I could not agree more. I have had friends who choose behavior that I find rather atrocious, or I'll be with people who I see are being very kind of abusive to their kids, or they're making decisions that I think they're terrible, but I don't judge them. I try to be very compassionate and just try to understand that they're on their path, and there's really not too much that I can do about that at that moment. But I recently had an experience where I witnessed someone being rather abusive to her daughter, and many years later, her daughter is now in therapy and she's healing, and she's seeking me out as a more healthy person to come towards. So it's interesting. Instead of judging, I just maintained my loving stance, and it's working out in its own beautiful way.
Yeah, she's resonating with your energy. I got a couple more questions as we wind this down. One is, tell us about your new book project.
Okay. So again, I was chatting with one of my spiritual mediums, whatever, and she said, "I'm getting a message for you." I said, "Really?" And I had been getting told for a long time that I was supposed to write another book. In fact, I was supposed to write 2 more books. I said, "What? Okay, this is interesting." So sure enough, there was the validation. You're supposed to write a book. And she said, "You are such a dynamo and such a role model for the 3rd chapter of life." And people think about the 3 chapters of life. The first chapter is when we're in our formative stages, growing up, making our relationships, going to school and everything. The second chapter, we're establishing our careers, we're establishing families, whatever we're doing. And then there's the 3rd chapter, we retire. So now what do you do when you retire? Some of us become Julie Ryan, and you have a whole new thing, marvelous thing going on, right? Some of us become Irene Weinberg. I have all this. And other people make all these other choices. And some people choose to go through their 3rd chapter, and they think, "Well, I'm going to die, and I'm just going to let myself go." And they become very depressed. And they have lives are basically, they're bored, or they're whatever, they're busy. They're able to take good care of themselves or whatever. And this person said to me, because you're such a role model for getting older and taking care of yourself, it'd be really wonderful for you to, they're asking you to put together a book which would be an anthology of people's third chapters. And it will help a lot of people. And so, as it felt right, because I've been getting other messages and feeling inside too, I think I'm supposed to write another book or whatever. And it just resonated with me. And with faith, I start the process. If I get the message, I start moving forward. And then my attitude is, if other things kick in beautifully, I know it's meant to be. And that's exactly what happened. And the book is called Good to the Last Drop, which dropped into my head. Talk about divine message. And it's going to be about people's third chapters, embracing your life's third chapter. And Julie, you're in it. As you know, you have a wonderful chapter in it. And I asked people who I know who are in their third chapters, and they're men and women, fascinating stories filled with different choices people have made and all, but every single one of them has chosen to make a difference in their third chapter, good to the last drop, and take care of themselves and make a contribution to the world. So I think it's going to be a very inspiring book. There's so many people who are aging with all of these choices that we have as to how we are going to live our lives. Are you going to live it good to the last drop, or are you just going to be miserable and drop? That's
right.
Really part of the choice.
And we'll have all the links to the new book and all of that
Absolutely.
in the show notes. So it'll be easy for you to find. And I can't wait to read it myself.
It's going to be
with everybody's stories.
It's going to be
It'll
fascinating,
be really
great
fun.
And let me tell you something. One of the things that is really very touching when you read these stories is how every single person, we're talking about third chapters. So if you read their stories, you see all the lessons they had to learn and all the things that they went through in their lives. Not easy. And how they took those lessons, those experiences, and what they did with it now that they're in that third chapter. There are people who cling to their story. Julie, this happened to me when I was 20 years old or 30 years old, and I'm never going to get over it. And that's my story, and I'm going to be miserable, and I'm sticking to it. There are other people who come through it, they heal, they process it, and now they're in their third chapter, and they're moving forward as a result of all the lessons that they've learned that have made their lives so wise.
Last question. Why do we incarnate?
We incarnate to evolve. We incarnate to learn our lessons from life to life to life to life. In my first book, I have actually a story of part of my evolution was not to come with Saul in a certain lifetime. And I was on my own in that lifetime because I was evolving to learn how to be on my own in that particular lifetime. And we keep evolving until we go, our vibration, we actually reunite, I think, with Source as we keep evolving. And I've actually been told that some people, as you keep learning and evolving, then you can choose to stay on the other side and not come back to help be a guardian angel or a spirit guide or whether to help other people who are incarnating and going through their journeys. So I've been told I'm an old soul. I've had many, many lives, and some of them were Lollapaloozers, Julie. Really, really hard. But thank goodness I learned the lessons, and here we are.
Here we are. Oh my gosh. Well, I am in awe of you. I think you're just absolutely extraordinary.
Thank you.
I believe that you are doing so much good in the world. And I'm just honored that you're part of my life and grateful for you. And especially thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom with all of us that are listening today. How can people learn more about you and your work?
The easiest thing, just go to my website. Irene Weinberg, Weinberg, IreneWeinberg.com. You can check out my books. You can check out my website. You can hear the video of my story. You can subscribe, which thank you so much. Subscribe to the podcast. I interviewed the most amazing people, including Julie Ryan. My whole purpose, the purpose of the podcast, and I encourage people also to please sign up for it on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. The purpose of the podcast the mission is to educate as I was educated, because I did not know anything about this world, and voila, to educate people, to enlighten them, and to give them healing choices. Because I'm very passionate about the fact, Julie, that I've been healing all my life. And what a pleasure to drop that backpack of trauma, of drama, of self-pitying, of victimhood, and be able to drop that all to really have joy and be able to pass it forward in your life. And so that is why I present people like you and other people for healing choices, that hopefully they will listen to an interview from my end, like they're listening to us now, become educated as to, we're talking about souls and growth and all, become enlightened. So hopefully their vibes also continue to rise. And if they need it, hey, here are all these wonderful people. Take your choice, listen to their story. Who do you want to choose to help you in your journey?
Exactly. All righty, everybody. That's it for this week. Sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama. Mwah! And from New Jersey, too, where Irene is. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow Julie on Instagram and YouTube at Ask Julie Ryan, and like her on Facebook at Ask Julie Ryan. To schedule an appointment or submit a question, please visit AskJulieRyan.com.
This show is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. Please contact a licensed professional. The Ask Julie Ryan Show, Julie Ryan and all parties involved in producing, recording, and distributing it assume no responsibility for listeners' actions based on any information heard on this or any Ask Julie Ryan shows or podcasts.